right, so we are live. Welcome everybody to the wonderful and exciting discussion for my favorite book of the series, Initiate Trial. I'm laughing because I tell this every time for every book, but this book was different for very different reasons, and it surprised me many times, pleasantly so. But before we get into details, quick round with the panelists here. Maybe we'll start with PL.
Hey everyone, so happy to be back with you all. And again, I'm such a huge fan of Janny's work. She is my favorite author, and this is my favorite fantasy series. And this is my favorite fantasy series. It came on me later in life. I didn't read Janny's work until just the last few years, and I haven't looked back. It has overtaken everything that I've read previously. This book we were speaking about quickly. Hey Nico, before the broadcast, it was marvelous, but at first, honestly, it was jarring, and we'll get into that later. Why I felt that way, but it was miraculous. I do have to complain to HarperCollins, the publisher, because the print of this book is microscopic. I don't know what happened with the edition I got, but you can it's tiny, and my eyes aren't as good as they used to be as I become a graybeard. But it was worth it, of course, to read the tiny micro print. But yeah, it was a phenomenal book, and I can't wait to chat about it with you all.
Can I interrupt there? Because I looked at this book and I was like, oh, this is not that big as the other ones. And then I opened it, I was like, oh no, this is going to be
I think you're talking about the mass market edition. The mass market edition is in 6-point type. Get your magnifying glass. I was not permitted by contract. I was supposed to, but I never saw the page proofs. They shot me the final volume and I saw it and I just about died. They really need to go back and reprint this book because it is next to unreadable. Try to get the trade paperback or the hardback if you can. Get the ebook where you can expand the type and buy the trade, the mass for your shelf so it looks pretty. But it broke my heart. Honestly, it broke my heart. I consider it unreadable. 9-point type, I think 8 or 9. I think 9 is what Malazan is in. And 9 is what the new book is going to be when it comes out, Song of the Mysteries. I got that all straightened around. That's readable. So my apologies, but it was kind of slammed on me from behind. I think it was a production decision to scrape pennies on the dollar. But it's not the way I would have preferred it.
You're the only author that I was worth struggling through this for, Jay. But you're worth it, so it was.
Well, please read the book anyway, because that is the way we can maybe get this problem corrected. Is enough pressure on the publisher. And if you can get the paperback or the hardcover, the type is perfectly fine in those editions. No problem there. So that's why it was a total blindside.
Yeah, hardcover it's not like huge, but it's very readable. You're kind of cutting out a little bit, Angie.
Can't really hear you, Angie. You keep cutting it in and out. There's a clicking sound, so not sure if you can hear us.
There you are.
Better. That's better.
Okay. So, Nico, would you like to introduce yourself? What I was saying.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I'm very much not a morning person, but I'll get up to talk with this group about this series. So, sorry, I was running just a touch late there. But yes, so I'm Nico from Nico's Book Reviews. This is the greatest series of all time, full stop. And I I was always so hesitant to say that because the last series that I thought might become my number one ended up not making it in the final volumes, and so with this, I'm just like it is. It's just not only is it my favorite, but just it's the best I've read, and I'm so excited to get to the last book, and I've really enjoyed talking with all of you guys. So this is kind of this series too. I'm like, it's weird to me that I didn't read it earlier because my channel and kind of my niche is especially stuff like this, stuff that's a little bit older, is maybe a little less known, that's big on like the world building and the slower storytelling in some ways. So this was just one of those things I started. I'm just like, okay, so this series was written for me. I need to hurry up and read this. I am in the core audience, but I really enjoyed Initiate's Trial, and I know exactly what PL was talking about with it, and I know I've heard from some others too. It can be kind of jarring, but like I got into it like right away. It does have a little bit of a different feel at the start of this book, but I really enjoyed it. And just was immediately absorbed in. But I can talk more about that in a little bit later once we jump into that section. So
yeah, sort of upside down. The farm boy enters in book 9. Right? Usually you start with the farm boy in book 1 only, and also he's grown up. So it's a different, but I was sort of playing with the tropes there a bit. I admit it.
I was just chatting recently with Joanna about just how, Janny, you take every trope imaginable and subvert it. And yeah, this is just another example, I feel, of that, because something that you normally see, and then you're just like, oh, let's throw that here, toward the end here in the second to last arc. Why not? And yeah. Just fun way to do
this
it.
was fun too, because you always see the young farm boy who's the chosen one, and he's special. This guy isn't special. He's not special at all. He's Joe every day. Get big muscles on the plow and a little bit thick, but terribly loyal. So he's not the chosen one at all in this opening. So yeah, I was playing with the tropes a bit. I couldn't resist.
It's
Maybe just Blaze would like to introduce, and then we can straight away get into the non-spoiler section.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be back. I'm Blaze from Under the Radar SFF Books. This is by far my favorite series of all time. I remember reading Initiate's Trial for the first time. It was actually probably about 2 years ago. I was actually shocked to begin with of how the book starts, and we'll talk about that more. And I've been waiting 2 years to discuss this with a group of people. So this is very enjoyable. But the best way I can describe Initiate's Trial is much similar to like Curse, Ships, and Warhost. Think of it not as the 9th book in the series. Think of it more as like the first book in like a trilogy, because books 9, 10, and the finale, they go together. And it touches on events from the past which come into focus. So once I got that in my head, the story just flew. And some of the characters in these final 3 are my favorite of the whole series, and by far, we'll talk about those coming up. So I can't wait.
Right. Okay. So I think we can get into the spoiler section now. So who would like to go first with anything that comes into your mind, but non-spoiler?
Well, that start, for one thing, it's a cold bath of water on so many different counts. And you're starting at the ground level with certain of the characters, but you're absolutely not starting at the ground level with the plot, because everything that opens Initiate's Trial stems from the explosive finish of Storm Fortress. If you think about that final scene on sand at Aether, all of those paychecks come due all at once with a screaming vengeance. So we can talk about the opening fairly well with a non-spoiler, but there had to be a way to put the brakes on the readers to pick up the intricacy of what resulted from that scene that closed arc 3.
There was, yeah, I mean, there was so much for me too. And I think, PL, the way you touched on it with the, the arcs feeling separate, Storm Fortress felt like the last book of a series to me. Like, obviously there was that's why I can't wait for the actual last book, because there was so much happened. It was so huge. There were so many emotions. There was a lot of stuff that just kind of had an air of finality while still so much stuff to come. And this book starts to show you that, yeah, there's a lot more coming too. But the end of that arc was it was so good. I feel like, if like you stop there and, wait, like you still feel like I read this series, even though, there's so much more to come. And so I think the way this book approaches it actually made a lot of sense for me, because instead of being like, all right, we're going to amp things back up again, it's like, now hold on, like we did a lot here, we have some other things that we need to do. And so kind of the way this started, the new characters and the way we were kind of just focusing on them, it had almost a little bit of like a cozy feel to start with, which is not something that you necessarily expect. And so, yeah, I think for me, it kind of worked to kind of just like reset as a reader and be like, okay, this was huge, but now we're getting ready for what's to come. And so, yeah, that's kind of my non-spoiler, why I really, really worked for me, and I think pulled me in right away.
Yeah, the beginning, the 250-year time jump, that's non-spoiler. It's on the first page.
I wasn't sure if I could say that, so I was trying to tiptoe around it.
It's okay. There's a big time jump. Once you get over the shock of it, and like going forward, and you're picking up the pieces left behind, the little breadcrumbs of what came before. It's really it takes the level down a little bit just to build it back up. Some of the scenes that in the past that we slowly get to see unveiled. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think subconsciously I would like to know a little bit more about that, more string out. But it's a hurdle that unfortunately you have to get over and persist. And the characters in this volume, once they hit home, they really, really hit home. I'll leave it for the spoiler section to talk about which characters in particular are absolutely my favorite. And you get a deeper understanding for some of the characters we've known far before, especially Arathon and Lysair in particular, as well as how far the Coriani will go. But that's spoilers, so I'll leave it to that.
Yeah, and I think, we were talking about this just before we came on air live, that for me it was that the shock that Nico's referring to, that feeling was more, I think, the acceptance, almost a mourning of the fact that some of your favorite characters are now dead. They've outlived their natural lifespan, and some of their progeny lives, and that's great, and that they provide some amazing new characters. But I think part of it, it's almost like a grieving, like you realize that, oh, so and so's gone, they're long dead, they're now we're on their granddaughter, their great grandson, or and that, I think that was part of what I internally had to come to resolution about and accept. But once you kind of get over that, and because the story is so immersive and your Janny's draw sucks you in right away, you almost forget about it. And then later on, as Janny did such an exceptional job of revealing those tidbits that as Blaise said, you really want to know about, well, what happened to so and so? Well, Janny gives you that where it's critical, right? She gives you enough without belaboring it about, exactly all the details of this person's life story, but she gives you the major points to give you enough that you have a feeling of satisfaction that this character's arc, this beloved character that I love so much, and that was in 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 books, and is now 100 or more years dead. They fulfilled their arc. Their life had meaning. This is what happened, and this is how it contributed to the overall story. So Janny did a phenomenal job of tying up those characters' lives without giving you all the minutia about what happened to them. So it was really well done. But it was more me personally. I had to get over that. Oh my God, so dead. Like, do you know what I mean? So that. But once I got past that, and because the story is so immersive, gets you in there right away. That I was able to quickly get over that aspect.
Yeah, I did know about it because I'd heard somebody specifically mention it before, and which, I mean, that's where I'm like, I don't know that it's necessarily a spoiler, because yeah, if you look into the series at all, you'll see that, like, oh, this one, that there's the time jump. So I feel like maybe that helped because I was expecting it, but I just also, with going in, I had no idea how it was going to start, and I wasn't expecting it to start the way that it did at all. But it's kind of like, okay, all of the new things happening and the way that we kind of weave backwards a little bit. I think for me, it worked really well because it was able to kick us off exactly where we needed to be. And we still get that, feeling from Janny that, like, hey, if you missed something important, I'm going to let you know what happened. And not just like, well, what happened to this, and that. Between the last book and this book, I feel like you get a lot of details and closure on events still. So well handled.
There were some important things that had to come forward. As I was mentioning before we opened up, there were certain things about the setting that had to be developed. And the only way to do it was this way, was to step in with new characters and show the setting from a different lens 250 years later. What happens to a fanatical religion when it ages? It always will schism and split. You will always get sects. You will always get disagreements in doctrine. What happens during that period for Lysair? Because this book begins to show Lysair's story, all the complaint in the beginning that, well, Lysair's just depicted as the bad guy and you never really get to see two sides. This book opens and begins to show you that internal dialogue that Lysair had through those events that you never saw before. So there were a lot of reasons to yank the rug and refresh the setting and give you that time jump so that you could see historically what changed. Because if you saw it in increments, if all those things were written out, besides me not being able to finish this story in my lifetime, it would have dragged, because a lot of that stuff happened very slowly. There are periods in history that are more slackwater, where huge events don't happen, and huge events do happen, but I don't want to reveal the impact of them or the underpinnings of them until Song of the Mysteries. So they're shaded in here much the way the necromancy was in the early volumes. It's a little drop here, a little drop there, but those events are explosively huge, and when the whole thing opens out. So there were a lot of reasons to make that 250-year jump. In addition, the moment where this story opens, two very hugely explosive things happen. And they're very intricate and they're very tied to the finish of Storm Fortress. If I'd picked it up at the pitch that I had finished at Storm Fortress, you would have run right over exactly what was going on, how those threads tangled and crossed, and it's pretty complex. And all of the ways those threads tangle and cross are going to matter. So it was a matter of parsing it so the comprehension could be there and build a story around it. And yes, your favorite characters were going to die, so I had to build a new set. And that was hard. It was a challenge for me as an author to get you to love these people. And hopefully I succeeded. But it takes a while to warm up, because you're expecting, oh, I'm going to read about all my favorite things. And suddenly the whole ground has changed. This is an arc start. It is always going to gear back at an arc start and then build from there again.
I did like the new characters, for the record. So it's especially our farm characters, that storyline. Like I said, I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it was because it hit that, nostalgic, farm type of thing that, like you said, you see in a lot. But it just like that, the whole opening, it was just like, it was so nice and peaceful, almost kind of cozy. And I'm just like, I'm here for it. I feel like I was ready for that after, you know, the emotional shipwreck that was Storm Fortress. I feel like this was really nice because I went straight into it. So I'm like, okay, this is a chance for me to like breathe, relax, get in here before, you know, Janny crushes me again emotionally, which you always know is going to come. But
if the other books are lacking in any way, it's because there's very little family dynamic. And it isn't that family dynamic isn't part of this world. So it was nice to show a family dynamic, you know, sibling spats and the usual type of family naughty problems that you can get into. So yeah, it was a different angle of approach that to me fleshed out that, yeah, this world isn't unique and that you have all these very powerful individual characters doing huge things. There's also the family side.
Yeah, but what I loved about that trope too is that with that trope, what I specifically love about the trope is that you know that their peaceful, mundane, day-to-day existence is gonna get totally messed up and disturbed by bigger events than what's playing out with their lives, and that's what I was waiting for, and of course, that's what happened. And
no Black Riders, no Black Riders.
no Black Riders, but that also tied into and what Janny said something very fascinating, something that a theme that also has always fascinated me about the religious aspect, and we can't talk about it specifically until we get to spoilers. But when she mentioned about, you know, long-standing religions eventually having schisms and splitting and fracturing and fragmenting, and, you know, splinter parts, you know, thinking their way is the way versus, you know, the original doctrine, like those things, that just, I absolutely love that stuff. You know, so for
what do you
me,
do when the Messiah walks out?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that was just incredible, right? That the Messiah became an apostate, right? To essentially the doctrine of his own religion, right? And that was just, you know, Janny, you know what gets me. You know me well. Like,
Boom.
I was just, you know, give me more of that, right? And the whole true sect plot, and just, yeah, it was just, yeah, I ate that up. That was, you know, that was just so incredible. So I can't wait to talk about that in the spoiler section.
Right. So overall, this was a blockbuster, right? We can call it a blockbuster without doubt. I think this book did the impossible for me, that I started liking Lysair. I mean, I started to empathize with him. Like, really, I mean, I didn't see that coming. So I was like, okay, I mean, I feel him, I understand him, why the way he is, and he is showing some form of restraint, and he is some which he never showed before, I think, at least not in Stormed Fortress. So and the way the whole conversation between him and Daliana about Talit, it revealed a lot about him and his you know, character, and so that was unexpected, and I really loved that part, that how Lysair was shown in this book.
You have to realize he was the ruler. He was the prince. He was the statesman. He was never going to show his heart to the public. And after Deegan died, who was his confidant? Sylphanevan. After Sylphanevan died, who was his confidant? And even Sylphanevan, he didn't tell him everything or show him everything. If you go back into the events in Peril's Gate, you will see that Sylphanevan would see brief glimpses of the true person underneath, and then it would immediately get covered up because the statesman took over. We don't reveal ourselves. So Initiate's trial is the beginning of Lysair's unwinding and showing the person underneath of the persona that people complain I didn't do right at the get-go in Ships of Marior. Absolutely not. I wait to drop my cards. So this should give you a retrospective view back into Lysair's actions throughout the series, because now that you've seen behind the facade, you have a clue. You will pick up the clues in the earlier volumes of the person that was there all along.
That's where I have to share, since we're talking about it, because it's one of the things I was talking to Joanna about, because she's on Fugitive Prince, and she sent me a message saying that she's like, okay, I kind of feel bad for Lysair. I don't think I'm supposed to, so like, I don't know if I'm getting this wrong, but she's like, I kind of feel bad for him. And I'm like, no, we all come around eventually. You're just ahead of the curve. And so I'm just like, yeah, that's, I didn't want to like him. I didn't want to feel bad for him. I'm like, I'm on Arathon's side 100% from the first book, but then more and more, it's just his story really is so tragic, and so you can't help but feel for him a bit. And then yeah, when you get the glimpses throughout the series and like kind of see the real him, it's just like, man, I'm being way too hard on this guy. Like, yeah, he's done some stuff for sure, but so much of it's out of his control, and it's just. That's a character that is still hard for me to believe. All the different ways you've twisted me around with Lysair.
Look at the events, though. If you go back to Fugitive Prince, that moment where he gets the word that his son died, he is shattered, and it shows. And Sophonevan picks it up, and it happens for a brief second, and in walks Geriatis, the blood priest, the necromancer, and cuts it off. Uses everything with the curse, everything with the necromancy, literally smothers the human being. So I think if you go back through the series ever and read it again, you will see the human being under Lysair, but it's always getting short-circuited. He's a tragic figure. He has flaws, huge flaws. He's a tragic figure in that those flaws were exploited. But if you look at the way the series unfolds, now that you have the lens to view it, you will see Lysair in a different light.
I'm not saying I'm particularly I'm more perceptive than anyone else, because obviously I'm not. But I think it was more because I'm so in tune with characters like Lysair that from day one I was much more on his side. Janny knows I was always a big fan of Lysair. And again, as she said, the tragedy of his arc and the burden of being in charge is something that is a theme that I always hone in on when it comes to characters with immense power and immense responsibility, and the fact that often isolates them. And as Janny says, they can't reveal their true feelings. They often have to, in the efforts to appear, as a statesman, and the efforts to appear as a ruler who is, even keeled, and unflappable, and that their emotions again won't show as a weakness. Lysair's cut himself off from it, not just because of curse, but the curse, yes, but he's cut himself off. But he was also raised that way, and he gives those little tidbits throughout the series about how he was raised. He gives some in Nishit's trial about how he was raised to be a ruler. And his father had a big influence on that. I've always been kind of on Team Lysair in that way. Yes, Arathon's the hero, but of course, as you know me, I have a great affinity for flawed characters. So, and he's so well written, like all the characters in this book. So,
yeah, Angie, we told you to keep an eye open with Lysair. Like eventually something.
Oh wait, I am not yet Team Lysair. I'm still Team Arathon.
Look, I'm not saying Team Lysair or Team Arathon, but we always said there's more to Lysair than what is being shown on the page. From when I first started this series, even after I think it was Ships of Marrier, I knew I didn't like Lysair, but I always knew that there was something hidden behind the curtain. And then as we get to this point, you realize that he was trapped in a never-ending circle. So the curse is afflicting him, and then you have his lineage of justice to the nth degree. And with Arathon always around, it's always going to go in a circle. He can't escape. He can't escape the turmoil. It was not until you remove, with the time jump, when you remove the influence of that, you start to peel back the layers and see who he kind of truly is. Now, there's things that he's done that are kind of like unforgivable, but you understand like why it happened, and I feel like remorseful, especially reading Initiate's Trial for the second time, especially what went on with well, I'll save that for the spoiler sections, but yeah, this is definitely an eye-opening book in the series, more so than I think a lot of other ones. And you get to realize and appreciate the more subtle moments, I believe.
Yeah,
And
and
spoil now, maybe. Yeah, go
Yes.
ahead.
no, sorry, go ahead, Angie.
Now, I was just saying maybe we should start our spoiler section now.
Absolutely.
We can speak
No
freely.
complaints.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
Right. Go ahead.
All right, what did you guys
Yes,
think about the part where Arathon destroyed the mist ring in the fires of Mount Doom? Um,
That was a shocker, to be sure.
was not expecting it at all.
I just wanted to start with the spoiler section with the time jump, even though it is not a spoiler, but I really liked the time jump part. I knew it was coming at some point, and it was like the 9th book, so it didn't take me by surprise, and it didn't affect me in any way because I had a gap of 1 month before I picked this book up after Storm Fortress. So, I mean, it was not a continuous reading, right? So I was okay with picking up a new, and I knew it was the beginning of a new arc. So I was expecting something a little bit different. So it didn't shock me. But I really wanted to know what happened in this 250 years, and I looked up Janny's website, and there are so many speculation. I think before Destiny's Conflict released, I think about there is this one whole thread about somebody speculating what exactly happened into, and I was sitting there and reading the whole thing, if that's what really happened, because I'm really curious to know what happened in 250 years. Was he trapped for the entire period of time, or all these questions burning in my mind, and that's why I cannot wait for Songs of Mysteries, which is coming out next year. So yeah, I mean, time jump I didn't have any problem with, so I'm in that rare group, Janny, that who actually loved
Well,
that.
you were wondering whether Arathon was trapped for 200 something years?
No,
Is that what-
I was just thinking, yeah.
Yeah, he went to play music at James's wedding.
Yeah.
And he stepped out of the circle in transit, and the Coriathane called the Oath of Debt due, and Dakar had to allow the Coriathane to take him.
Right. And also I somehow...
And it will weave its way through. You will get the flashback moment when that question gets answered. Like I said, these two books blur together a little bit. But yeah, he was trapped for 250 years with essentially bodiless, fighting these wraiths from Marek until the day that they were all gone. And that's the day that this story opens.
Okay. All right.
And it will backfill in even more as Destiny's Conflict gets rolling too. You'll get the in-depth view of what exactly happened.
Yes, the traitor that comes the next book, but that flashback. But yeah,
who's that? Don't give me spoilers.
No, I'm not telling you who it is. I'm just
that's
saying there's a traitor in the midst. So, but you'll read that in the next book. So
I'm scared to talk about that because some of it is in Destiny's Conflict, so I don't want to spoil it. So we'll wait till then to get into the old nitty gritties. But yeah, it continues. So we'll backfill that.
But I mean, it's just with the whole thing with it too, with Arathon, and just like seeing everything that he's gone through, but like the way that it opens in the kind of, and I said a little bit about it, but I was also just trying to be careful in the non-spoilers. But this, the very beginning of this book feels like almost like a soft reboot in a way. And I mean that in a positive way. And it doesn't stay like that for long, but that kind of like, hey, we're going back. We're obviously continuing the story, but we're kind of starting from a new place. And like I said, for me, that it pulled me in very quickly. I almost felt like I was starting something new. And so I got invested in the new stuff very quickly. And then as we start to weave back in the main story, I'm just like, yes, I'm already now down for the new characters. And now I'm really interested to see how everything affects them. And yeah, seeing like the canon and like their lot and how they've done everything, and then seeing Lysair that's just like walked away from all of it and is just actually kind of like human through this period, because he's not being afflicted by a curse that he can't fight every minute of every day and everything. And so the things that I feel like the time gap did accomplish, with also, you know, wrapping up the Mist Wraith, which I still remember how naive I was. One of my complaints about Curse of the Mist Wraith is like, it feels like they defeated this thing way too easily. Like I was expecting it to be a lot harder. Little did I know, we're going to be waiting until Initiate's trial to wrap that up. And that was
No,
immediately...
you're going to be waiting till Song of the Mysteries,
Well,
and
I
you
was gonna
have
say-
no idea. Too easily,
Oh God.
you have no idea. It's coming.
Oh man, well, and I can't wait still. But yeah, that's just it is one of the things. It was another one of my perceptions and the things that was subverted, because I loved how it was woven in. Like, you know, it seemed like we were just doing like, oh, you know, it's the prophecy, so we need them. Like, no, this was a huge problem. It continues to be a problem. And then knowing that it took Arathon 250 years to just be individually banishing just the ones that got through, like there are still more, but like just the ones that like got through, like it took that long. And so yeah, I mean, it's just all of that stuff. I feel like the time jump, because that can be jarring and that can be divisive. And I know I've seen some people complain about it and just be like, I wish we wouldn't have done that. But I think for me, it's everything that it allows to happen in the way it does. And the fact that, you know, the characters they drank the 500 years fountain in book 1. Like, something needed to happen here. I mean, we weren't going to just be like, and then the book ends and they lived for another 450 years happily ever after. Like, I mean, we can't do that. So something had to happen at some point. And I just think it worked so well for me personally.
There was an inversion here, which was an important inversion. From the beginning of Curse of the Mist Wraith, Arathon was a trained initiate master. Even in his worst moments, even in his most drugged moments in the opening of Curse, he always had a measure of control. In this book, all of that, every bit of that is stripped away. So in a way, he becomes as stripped bare of any power as Lysair. So you're looking at a core character without the training, without the initiate master, without all the levels of power, without the rogue ability of Farsight, without any of the attributes that made him what he was, even in Curse. So you're seeing the core character stripped to nothing in this book. And so it actually reveals facets to who he really is that you would not have seen in any other way. And it also enables you to discover going forward what has changed in the world through the character's eyes, because the character knows nothing. They stripped off everything that made him what he was, so he could not be found. So he was stripped down to an ordinary person. And so to me, why are the readers complaining? You're seeing a whole facet of personality you would never know was there. He would know it was there, but he would never show you that.
Yeah, and I think that was exceptional, because with his amnesia and not knowing who he really was, as Jenny said, you get to see who he really is beneath that, right? And what is he beneath that? And Chibipo raises it. Like, his compassionate traits, his innate compassion continues to shine through. And as Chibipo said so well, he just wants to help people and heal people. But I want to talk quickly about, again, this just goes back to the utter brilliance of Janny, is that right away she crushes us, because we realize that Telia, Arathon's daughter, now we go back all the way to the conception and the willing possession we talked about in the last book with Gwendian on essentially on Alara's behalf, conceiving a child, and also the Bidars, say interference or interjection or intervention, I guess, that Talia the Koryaping taker, and she grows up to be sworn as a Koryaping, but she ends up sacrificing herself to save Erathon, and to after he escapes because Seldy tries to kill him with this spell, and she takes it instead, and her whole arc is achieved, and we don't see her life. We don't see how she grew up, other than knowing that she became an initiate for the Koryat that, but her whole purpose, is accomplished essentially. But and it's so tragic, and what's even more tragic is Erathon has no idea. He doesn't know anything about it. Right? Like it's just that was just absolutely heartbreaking. Erathon had a daughter, and she lived all that time and ended up sacrificing herself for her father so he could escape.
That was her whole purpose. You realize that if you read that scene closely in the close of Storm Fortress, the crone had her finger in the brew. She is actually an ancestral spirit of the Bidar, and her whole purpose was to subvert what happened at Athir. That was her entire purpose. She was you'll see. So yeah, there's actually threads stirring right at the opening of Initiate's trial that are going to unwind in crazy ways in the final volume. And this is the start of it. But yeah, that was her whole purpose. And she left Sethvir by her free will. It was more complicated than that, but that was her purpose, was to subvert that oath of debt. So yeah, people weren't expecting that. They were expecting that character to grow up and be some huge thing, not seeing the strings that were being pulled that created what happened.
Yeah, you tore her heart out again, Janny. Just right away. Just stop talking. Just stop. Wow.
Should I just end it now?
Better way. I need my Song of Mysteries. So I'm kidding. It's not about needing Song of Mysteries, but
the page proofs are done. I will be trying to work out some ARCs.
Yay.
So,
Right.
let's hope I can manage to get you a copy before the release so you can begin to build some interest, because but that's my next step. I'll probably have to wait till after the holidays to start kicking on that one, but I don't want you guys waiting.
I'll just disappear for a week and do nothing.
A week? Last week we tried that. It lasted about 12 hours, 18 hours maybe.
Oh, wow.
And then going to have to reread it again for the subtlety, because it just does not relent.
I was going to say, I tried so hard to take my time with these books, and especially as I got later in the series, I just couldn't take my time. I had to force myself to slow down, because I wanted to make sure I was still paying attention to all of the little things, because there's so much in retrospect too that you just see a lot of pieces coming together. I can't wait for my first reread as well, but I just it was hard not to just rush through, because I'm like, I gotta know what's happening, what's going on. So.
That's where the non-English speakers do better. Angie.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I mean, you want to rush through, but you cannot, because I'm scared that because of the beautiful language and prose that Janny uses, you cannot just skim over, because you might then miss some subtle clues that she has left behind, or sometimes it will be a revelation, it will be an important revelation, but you might miss it, because if you skim through it, this is not a book that you can just skim through and just say that you have read it. So I actually took only, I'm surprised that for this bigger book I took only 1 week, because I'm a slow reader, but I did finish it in 1 week. So even though I couldn't rush, I hope I have not missed anything. But if I have, I will pick them up in the reread. But it is true that uh, I have this conscious thing in my mind always that I have to read slow because I'm not my first language, so I have to be very careful. And Janny's language is so sophisticated and so elevated that I have to, like, really work hard sometimes. I don't know if it's the case with native speakers as well, but for me, I felt that even though I have read English books from childhood, it's like, almost like first language to me. Even then, I have to take my time with it. And I like Nico said, I want to take 2 weeks to read it, but I cannot because there is so much happening that I have to know how it's going to end. Yeah, I also
Yeah.
wanted to say suddenly something that came into my mind about Dakar. Um, he finally left the mother's nest, or was kicked out, basically, just like the mother bird does. And I really like that angle of Dakar because you always felt that he's kind of a spoiled brat kind of thing. And he always feels that the sorcerers are always behind him. That, if he groups up, they will help him. But now finally he is on his own and he does so good and so well, and he is so much better off, I feel.
Yeah. Well, that leads into the who do you think the initiate trial is from the title? I assume that a lot of people discuss because it could go some different ways. So I'm curious what you
Yes,
thought, Angie.
I think it is what is this guy's name? The guy who gets separated from the farm boy.
Terrence.
Terrence?
Terrence. I'm thinking that. I don't know, or maybe I could be completely wrong. Why is everybody having a poker face? I don't like it.
Well, I mean, for me, all I will say is that, in my theory, initiate for me implies, for me, the Korea thing. It always thinks of the Korea thing. The moment I hear that word initiate, that doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means that that's what it calls to mind. It's indoctrinated into me now after reading, especially the short stories and the whole series. So, we'll see. I have a theory, but I'm gonna keep that one close to the vest until
the title applies multiple ways. There are more than one initiate in this book. There's more than one initiation in this book. My titles always have multiple echoes.
But if I was gonna, other than the Korea thing, my actual, I don't think it really fits. But in my head, I see Jestry, the High King, because he's
Jestry. Yep. Arathon.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
He was initiate master. It's all stripped away.
Yeah.
Terrence. It goes on.
Dakar for me.
Dakar. There are multiples. All the titles always have multiple angles.
That's why this one's so fun to talk about. Yeah, it's just because it's initiate's trial, and so I've discussed with some people on like Discord in a few places. It's just kind of chatting through because it's so interesting to look at all of the ways that it applies. But yeah, it was for me. It was just Dakar. It was like kind of. He plays a little bit more of an active role because he's been active, but also kind of always a passive character where he's going where he's told, where he's led, doing what he's told to do. And this is like, no, get out. We're done with you. You got to figure this stuff out for yourself. And so I thought that was just so interesting from his character. But yeah, it does apply in so many different ways. And that's why it is interesting that it sounds like it would be a very specific title, but it has such broad. Because I was expecting Alara to be who was like my immediate it's going to be something with her, and so I thought it was interesting how many ways it really does apply. So.
And I think one thing that really sticks out in my head is that, especially with Dakar and Alara, it's like, at what point do they ever get past the initiate stage? Like, does the car ever become, considering what we know the fellowship to be? I don't want to get into that too much, but can the car ever become a full fledged member? Can
I
Ilaria
mean,
ever? Will she ever become? Like
Nope.
a prime. Like, and it doesn't seem that way. However,
Well,
this is a pretty
I'm not
damn
going to
long
spoil
apprenticeship.
anything, but the Fellowship of Seven are totally unique. Nobody can become a Fellowship sorcerer
And
because
I
of the
understand.
binding laid on them by the dragons. But at this opening of this book, Dakar is already a master spellbinder, as Varian was at the start of the series. So he has progressed.
Yeah, he's progressed, but what's the ultimate fruition of his essential apprenticeship? Is it just that? Does he transcend and become something else? Yes, I understand why he can't become an actual member of the Seven, but what's the end goal? And same with Ilaria. How far does she go? And especially looking forward in what happens in book two, which is, yeah, I guess we'll find out in songs. But yeah, that's always like from the start of the first book. I'm like, what is Dakar's actual, like? Where does he end up, right? In terms of his ability, his rank, within, that's always been uh, something curious for me. So
I feel like with Dakar, I always think of like um that, yeah, basically like the full like mastery would be like he's off on his own somewhere, like Varain was, because Varain was said to be a master sorcerer as well, obviously completely different from the fellowship. But I think with the car, part of it's just he never really wanted to leave and go out on his own, and he didn't really want to do that, and so he probably could have been off stationed, considered the master, no longer an apprentice, hundreds of years ago, but because of his drinking and all of that, and to try to stop his constant prescience and all that, it's just he was more content to stay. So then he's kicked out, but I feel like, yeah, he probably had reached all he could reach while still doing that. He needed to go off on his own.
Did you miss that? Arathon was an initiate master at 18 years old. Varian is an initiate master or a master spellbinder at the beginning of Curse of the Mistwraith. Dakar is now a master spellbinder. So he's completed that section of his training. Why? Ask yourself, why did Sethfir kick him out and put a star stamp on the document exactly now? There is method to this madness.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he's a free agent. He is now a free agent, dissociated from the Fellowship of Seven.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember how much of that was in this book and how much of that was in Destiny's Conflict. So that's where I was speaking around that. But yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
If you look at the timing, that's exactly. And Dakar even mulls that over as he's kicking his way through the wilderness, soaking wet, getting rained on. He's mulling over, why did this happen? And he doesn't want any part of anything. He's being his usual drag my feet self. But nothing the Fellowship ever does is without a purpose.
Right. Yeah.
And for me, what that cued me over to was the fact that immediately I start thinking of the law of nature balance. So, how, is Dakar able to be outside of that now? Is he, and if he is, why, and what does that mean? Doesn't mean I'm right. That just immediately I started thinking about that, right? But again, that's something that I'm sure we're going to see more of, as Janny indicates in Song of the Mysteries, which I can't wait. I absolutely cannot wait to.
I hope that first scene with Asandir and the closure of the Oath of Debt and the oath he has to swear scares the piss out of you.
Yeah.
Like I said, part of the reason for slowing down this arc start was so the bombs could fall and the ripples and repercussions would really hit you. But that opening scene when he confronts the Prime and then swears it in stone, It'll carry through in
Anybody
interesting
feel
ways.
bad for Lorenda?
You know, I guess, you know, Lorenda's uber ambition and the things that she did, you know, a lot of people wouldn't feel sorry for her current plight, right? A lot of people would be like, she's getting what she deserves. But yeah, I can't help initially feeling a bit sorry for her because she's essentially enslaved. Um, the next book, I mean, but yeah, like in this book initially, I definitely I couldn't help feeling sorry for her, and it's more about the wickedness and the utter ruthlessness
Yeah.
of the Prime for me, for of Selby, more about than Lorenda, because you know what, Lorenda's ambition also helped put her where she was, right? She wanted that position, and things backfired on her. So I think it's more, a lot of this is a morality tale about, for me, about seeking, always seeking power and always seeking a certain status, and what happens when that's your main pursuit, right? You know, like, you know, sometimes you pay for that. So
I mean, she was also set up to fail, though. Like
yeah,
she was not given. I mean, that's where, like, she is a very easy to dislike character, but that's where I love the complexity, because, like, so easy to dislike her, but then also, like, I mean, who had it worse? Arathon on his own singing the rates for 250 years, or being a literal slave who literally magically cannot do anything that you're not directly allowed to do for 250 years? I mean, like, that's also just awful. And it's, yeah, like, she had some negative qualities, but going all the way back to Grand Conspiracy, and where you see that, like, you know, she is very human, like, under the shell. She is a person. She wants the same things any other people want, but you know, the choreothane, you're just like, no, you have to get rid of all of that and only think of the choreothane. So I think it's another one of those things where it's very difficult to find a character that's not so well faceted that you can't go both sides, you know, with it. Like, we were all talking about Lysair, which it's easy to dislike him early on, but, you know, you find out more, and nothing is ever black and white here. So that's, yeah, I did feel very bad for Lorenda. I'm sure she's going to make me regret saying that at some point, probably, but I couldn't help feeling bad for her, because, like, that is terrible what she's going through. And she did some things to get herself there, but it was definitely not all her fault either.
Yeah, Lorenda, she may have been set up
Just
to
a second.
fail, but it's because of her own actions. If you go back to Fugitive Prince, when the Prime, I forget the exact way of how it went down, but she basically she locks herself in the tower. She goes into like a like a super conscious state, and she predicts, like, Arathon's, like, death, and it was Lorenda interfering with that, when I think it was Catrick, or that was supposed to die, but she prevented that, at least at first, and because of that, like, the events happened the way it did, and then the Prime had a, like, bone to pick with her, like, throughout the rest of the series. And then what happens in Grand Conspiracy with the transference to Salidi, and then going forward, that's the grudge. That's the one bone to pick. She has, oh, sorry, Kale, you're right. Thank you. Sorry. Where she does not let that go. And it becomes very, very apparent the further you get into the series. So I felt really bad reading that in Initiate's trial. But, you know, events unfold, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this in the next book as well. But that's how it was. I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Lorenda,
I mean,
very complex character.
yeah, the whole imprisonment or slave that she's in, she pushed her to actually kind of liaison with the Fellowship Sorcerer. You know what I'm talking about towards the end of the book. Even though this is a spoiler, I don't want to give that away to our viewers if they haven't read it. But that thing with Setwi that happen, yeah, Setwi that happens, that Lyrenda permits that to happen, gives her consent. That itself shows how much she is frustrated and how much it has affected her, this whole enslavement part. And the fact that that reminds me about the fact that the threat of necromancy is still prevailing. So I mean, there are so many revelations slowly, because we don't know what happened in this 250 years. So slowly, the book also gives us what is existing, what is still there, who is still there, and who is playing the part. Especially with the whole religion thing. It is like we discussed in the beginning. It is so organically written by Janny that you actually believe, it's a true religion, because it's exactly it's very naturally progressing, right? And the whole divisions and denominations that's found formed inside the religion, and the disagreement. Um, and I just want to quickly bring up one of my favorite character in this book, which is the Hatchet. Uh, how awesome is he? How
Ruthless.
ruthless.
I
So,
loved I love the Hatchet. Oh my gosh, love that character.
right, I mean, we missed so many old characters from the previous time frame, but Johnny gifted us with some amazing new characters in this book. So there's nothing to complain, I think, with the Daliana and the farm boys and the Hatchet and all these new characters. They are as, I mean, we could quickly bond with them. We don't need 3-4 books to understand them initially that we took with other characters. Um, so I
Yeah.
really like the character of Hatchet. Very scary, very formidable. And I want to also say Arathon at this point, I think that Arathon is not master of shadow. He's like master of tricks, or he's a trickster. He's like Loki. He always he is like the master of subterfuge or something like that, right? I mean, he doesn't need to use his power or the shadow and all that to come out of a situation. He is like, he really uses tricks with his brains, and I really look forward to those moments. Where not raw power is used, but the tricks up his sleeves. That's what I usually look for when Arathon is involved or the Fellowship sorcerers are involved.
Always a lot of fun with Arathon, yeah. And it's the fact that so often that especially in the earlier books that came from him trying to show restraint. And so restraint with his power ended up with some of these crazy plans. It's just super, super intricate. But yeah, always a fun time. I definitely agree on the characters. Like I said, I was that was the thing that shocked me, is how quickly I was so sold on all the new characters. I just, yeah, you normally expect like, oh, it's going to take some getting used to, but no, I just like everybody fell in, and I really enjoyed the new characters very quickly.
Yeah, I love the, again, Jenny rips our hearts out by giving us characters to love and then taking them away. Jestri's death really affected me. I know that really got to me. And again, I've said this before in previous uh, deep dives into this series. The things that really impacted me are the times. So many things impact me, obviously, but when Janny shows us the price that the Cathadines and the High Kings pay for their service, like when she draws out those moments, like, ooh, no, they're not just going to be surrounded with with riches and glory, and no, it usually demands their life, right? That's the sacrifice, and Justry showed so much promise, right? And seemed like he that he was young, but we'd be such a great high king. And nope.
Well, you realize that the average ruling span of a high king over 5,000 years, the average was 4 years. They usually survived because they would retire Gestry was thrown in very young without the chance to acclimate to those 4 attunements, but you see how very powerful they are. So yeah, he overloaded his circuits and it killed him. He didn't have the guided chance to learn those powers or ease into them gently or learn how to mitigate the after effects. He had no chance. He had to step up. He had to go against Asandir's orders, actually, to do what he did. So this was a real revelatory moment, I hope, for the readers, where you actually see what a High King's attunement means. You see what a crowning involves, and you can differentiate between the sanctioned crown prince just with one tie to the land, one initiation to one element, to the full-fledged crown and what that entails and what happens to an overexposure to too much resonance too fast can do. So that should shock you going back to the beginning of the series, because when they talk about the historic High Kings and what that meant, you have a much bigger clue of the responsibilities that entailed. So yeah, Gestry's threat is tragic because he had to assume the full burden too fast and immediately and without help. And Dakar realized he did not have the ability to mitigate that. He was over his head. He had triggered those events. He had pleaded for this to happen, and now he was over his head.
And that immediately had me thinking about both Erathon and Lysier, who are princes and who have not obviously been crowned in their respective high kingdoms. And that, well, Lysier, first we're dealing with, you know, the possibility of that happening for him looks much more remote. But if it's Erathon, has all he's done and all that he's learned and all that he's mastered made him, to be essentially the most prepared to assume that.
Go back to Curse of the Mistwraith and look at how strongly they bind and hide the crown jewels from Arathon's knowledge, so he can't see what he's holding.
Yep.
You'll see that thread of what this actually was all the way back in Volume 1. All the pieces were there in Volume 1. If you knew what you were looking at, you would see it all.
And I remember that part. I remember after reading this book thinking that. And I also remember thinking about his trial in the tunnel and the things that happened there and wondering, well, may we actually see an Erathon coronation one day? And, I guess we'll have to find out. But that's the stuff that I was thinking about watching specifically Gestry's character and his unfortunate demise.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is one of the things that I've been most excited to talk about, because until like getting to this book to see the King's Jewels and to see a High King in action, and it does, my God, like you said, Jane, it really puts so many things into perspective, including the fact that while they were very, because I remember the specific line about how bad it would be if Erathon found out what the jewels really were, and it seemed like a throwaway line. It seemed like, oh, that's, it's just to make it on. No. And then if you think about in ships where he's like, yeah, I'm gonna use these in a ruse and sell them, and it's just like, and you think like the Fellowship, they must be like tearing out their hair, like he has no idea what he's doing here. He can't do this. And so it's just like the amount of power, and it's not like even like the short works too, I don't remember, Angie, if you read all of the short stuff. So I won't say anything specifically spoilers, but even there are references to the High Kings fighting and, being involved, but we never really see it until now. And it's just, so it's astonishing because we're finally seeing it, and it feels like so climactic, but it also just, it puts into perspective so many things from throughout the series.
You are not in a European aristocracy. This is not what you thought it was. This is not traditional medieval fantasy in any way, shape, or form. So your assumptions tripped you. And if there's anything I wish, it's that people would read far enough to see that their own assumptions of what they thought they were seeing, here's the Lord, here are the peasants, totally not what's happening. And in this book, that absolutely comes to the front.
Well, and that's just what, for me, makes this so masterful, because being the person who loves the classic, that style of fantasy a lot, I love so much of that stuff, but it's like, it's just every, like I said, every trope is subverted, and we've talked about that a lot. It's just like you never do what's expected, and the story is nothing like what it seems in the first book. And I've had that conversation with people too, to kind of give them an expectation that, like, hey, it does present this way, and like that seems to be a critique some people have, like, oh, this is just run of the mill good versus evil. No, it is anything but, and it's just, yeah. That was, for me, I don't know why it was specifically, because there's so many things as I've read that like recontextualized, but just seeing the King's Jewels in action, that was such a huge moment for me. I loved it so much.
There has to be a big payoff and reveal in every book. It's just I take my time dropping the cards, and at the time this was written, that kind of slow reveal wouldn't have been a problem. People weren't running away from traditional fantasy. So it would have been more fun just to watch it blow up. Now people are running away from it because of their own prejudice. And I would love to slap them with that. You think that's what you're seeing. Your own assumptions are tripping you here, but you can't change a prejudice or make a person, you can't make them see what they don't want to see or make them wait for what they don't want to wait for. But Arc 4 is really, it's Lysair's story. It's a number of other things, but it's also staging for the mysteries. You're starting to see the real underpinnings of how some of this stuff works, like what the High King's attunements and the crown jewels really meant. And that it was not a light step. It was life altering. It was irrevocable. You were not going to come out of it unless you were radically changed, if not dead. So yeah, we're upside down here. The mayors are elected for life, and the High Kings only served for brief periods and passed it on. So it's none of the assumptions are correct.
And this is perhaps slightly off topic from the book itself, but like series wide, because it brings me back to something I mulled over a lot in the earlier books too, which is the whole idea of the town versus the clans. And especially in like the Gallant, you got to see back before everything happened some of those relationships, but that seems like you get a lot of that focus here in this book as well, because of the fact that the clan presences have really been put down even more so in a lot of ways. Besides, Lysair sort of leaving them alone, but the other clans, like they aren't there. It's like the land is suffering, things are out of whack, and it's just that these people that aren't part of the clans, like, they don't understand. They still don't understand after all this time. It's still demonized, and then when things go wrong because they're messing with the people who have the power to, help put things in right, they just blame those people more. And so it's just this vicious cycle. And so much of it comes from just understanding. They don't understand the sacrifice and any of this at all. And so it's just, yeah, it's very realistic with that gap. I feel like, and just, two very different peoples not understanding each other, but it just makes it all the more tragic when you see even more so what the cost is that you pay as a High King, like what the cost you pay, and yet still you're part of a group who's demonized.
Yeah, and this is a big oversimplification, but through my reading the series and the other, some of the other shorts really show you about the person, how horribly the clans were persecuted and the price they paid. But it's a really oversimplification. But I always think about the fact that as a normal city dweller, I go to the grocery store all the time and we buy food, and you don't think about farmers. You don't think about where'd you get this food. It may be processed 10 times over, but where did it come from? It came mostly from farmers. It came from butchers. It came from all these people who are putting all this food on the shelves, but you don't think about that. You just think about, in your mind, you went to the store and you bought food. You don't think about what somebody did to get that food to you. And I think it's very much that's how I oversimplify things when I think about the clan and their importance to the whole land. They're the ones that have kept,
it's a good analogy.
As you point out, Nico, everything alive and growing, and the town born take everything for granted, that they're the center of everything, right? that they're the epitome of sophistication and civilization, but it's really the clan. So yeah, but I think I want to quickly touch before hopefully we can have time for the religious stuff later. But again, Janny's book, so much stuff happens that huge stuff happens that gets overshadowed. And this kind of dovetails a bit to religion, but you know, like, okay, so in this book, Davian is with the dragon, and they cause this plant to grow, and it throws the entire the planets off balance. Like the residents of the planet shift. Like I mean, it's easy to like overlook so many things. It's almost like holy shit, you know, like that. And I think in the last discussion I talked about the power of these, as Jenny brings these elder powers into prominence. Like you see what they're capable of. Like, and we talked about the dragons be able to remake reality. Like, okay, well, they cause a plant to grow. The high priest gets thrown to his knee. Like, it's just this huge stuff happens, but you're like, you almost overlook it because it's like, holy cow, this is how significant it is. But
there is so much, yeah.
Yeah.
Oversimplified thinking leads to polarization, leads to assumptions, leads to all of us missing the bigger picture. I mean, you can pick apart world events today and see that there's a way bigger picture if you assemble all the tiles. But very few people step off, this is my gut reaction, and I'm going to take a polarized stance right now, without delving into all of the intricate strings that tie everything together. So yeah, growing a plant on the far side of the world shifted the resonance of the entire planet. It kicked a few people to their knees because it made a major change at a frequency that the average townsperson isn't even aware of.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like that's absolutely, like, think about that. It's absolutely mind-boggling, right? And it's in these books, so much of your journey comes down to how much are you putting together. You know, it's not just an abstract thing that Erathon is battling race that are coming from another planet, right? It's like you don't. We often we don't tie these things in automatically when we're reading because the prose is so gorgeous and you're trying to read what happens to your favorite character, and but when you put all these things together, it's like your mind would, you know,
this arc, I think, is where it really places it in context with Malazan. If you look at all the things that you were talking about, Paul, that's exactly. But I don't drop all the cards on the table at the Siege of Pale at the opening chapter of. It's not a gaming sequence where you're looking at campaigns. You're seeing it through the individual eyes of the players. So it's a difference in perspective. It's the way those big themes are handled. But I don't think at Initiate's Trial and through Arc 4 and particularly Arc 5, you can avoid the fact that the spread of thematic depth is there for this series.
Yeah, that's where still I've said it before and I'll say it again. The way this series can be both deeply personal and character focused, and also one of, if not the most expansive, wide, complex world building type of things. The way that it does both, so great.
Just to piggyback on what Paul said, there's two things I want to talk about, and it's in relation to the resonance shift. So Initiate's Trial introduced us to one of my favorite characters for the entire series. I know readers feel the same way. I think you, Paul, feel the same way. Is Terrence, the quote-unquote farm boy, who helps out Erathon after he escapes, takes him in, helps him out. And then when Terrence is confronted by like the agents of the Cannon of Light, he, to save his family, commits murder and he's captured, and then Erathon saves him. It's that what you were talking about with Davian, and I can't pronounce the name of the dragon for
Sescrostial. Yeah, there you go.
When they do the resonance shift, or it causes the resonance to change, It's that direct action which causes Terrence to see Jarrett, and Jarrett gives him his memories, and it's that one act that it's a game changer. It completely shifts the story, and it completely shifts the characters going forward. Essentially, and we mentioned this earlier, what Daliana is, she's taken on that responsibility of Sulfin to Lysair. Terrans, similarly, is in some ways taking on that responsibility of Jarrett to Erathon. I don't know if it was officially done. I might have skipped that part, but he has his shadow behind the throne, like his Cathian, and just Terran's growth and what you see from him is going to be something that you're going to be eye opening for many people. But I just love Terrans to death. And another part, which is kind of related to the resonance, I don't know if we mentioned this, but Luhane's sacrifice. When Sethir tells the Fellowship that the dragon's going to go into hibernation, and that will kill Davian. And Davian, who's caused so much turmoil and so much back and forth, he's basically the Joker. He's the wild card with with the Fellowship. You don't know what he's thinking, what he's going to do, but Luhane realizes that he needs to save him, and that he sacrifices himself. He's Discorporate, so he's not going to die from it, but he realizes that he's a big player in what's going to happen. So he essentially takes his role in the story. I just thought that was very, very important, and I remember messaging Janny saying it's Luhane's sacrifice. So it's those are two big things happened in the story that just stuck with me.
Yeah, that is huge, and Davian, of course, one of my favorite characters, Davian, for sure. I love those wild card, unpredictable characters. There's so much that's going on that again, you don't have to understand everything, but Davian's doing everything he can to keep this dragon away from Erathon. He's doing everything he can to keep this dragon away from Erathon, and I'm like, okay, well, you're trying to put all this together in your head, right? Like, what's Davian's real game? What's his real? He obviously has one, right? And everything he's done so far has nominally been for the positive, that you, as on face value, anyways, you just don't know, right? So that whole aspect, I'm just, you follow all these million one things under waiting to see what the follow-up is, how is this bomb gonna blow up? And that's in the back of my mind, right? And Luhane's sacrifice, you're right, Blaze, that was also there. But so why is Davian so important, and what's Davian doing with the dragon? Because having read Black Bargain and understanding their a bit more about their relationship, Davian and the dragon, it's like, what's going on here, right? So and I have my theories again.
Read and find out. I don't know if you caught some of the subtleties that begin to appear in Initiate's trial when the resonance arises, that time starts to blur together and become simultaneous, which enabled Jarrett to intersect with Terrans, which enabled Erathon to intersect with all those pieces of ancient magic. When he sang the resonance high enough, when he closed the borders of Caithwood. So yeah, that's going to come to play even more later. So when those resonance shifts happen, it does more than just change things on the surface. It connects things across time. It does massive stuff that you're going to have fun with later. So in a way, this book is beginning to stage for those mysteries.
Well,
Yeah.
song of the mysteries, music has been a key element to this series, and Erathon's power to command it has at several junctures brought forward mysteries. So obviously that's going to play a role. Can't wait to see how. But I'm hoping we could get to chat at least briefly about the whole religious aspect. This what happened with this schism, this Lysair becoming an apostate, and this whole the High Temple of Light, and it was just astounding what Janny did with this, right? And I think Angie talked about the hatchet and how amazing a character he is as this military commander in charge of the troops. Like, but what I loved about what Janny did with the whole truth cycling is that Lysier is an apostate to this 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 section, this because of schism. But then he reclaims it. He reclaims it and uses it. It was amazing that he decides, he takes it back, right? And I think this is another part where we don't give Lysair enough credit for the fact that, and this is more an abstract thing, but Lysair is a great leader. He's a great ruler. He's charismatic. He has, if you read all the descriptions when Janny writes about him, she describes him of having so much majesty. Not just the fact that he's good looking, but he has so much charisma. He carries that authoritative, that magisterial demeanor. He's someone who attracts people to him because of essentially who he is and how he carries himself, right? And this is something that's natural, and he has that magisterial comportment. And but it's interesting when he does things that totally, they surprise you at his ability to do that. And how is he able to do that? Largely because of his charisma and his ability to convince people or coerce them, or threaten them, or charm them, right? And that's what I loved about this whole the schism, and like Lysier brings them back under his command and control. Like that was amazing, right? So, but I love that whole religious aspect, and the fact that these zealots were persecuting, and arbitrarily killing people who showed any trace of talent. And we go back to the persecution of the clans. That like it just shows you the harm that in some cases organized religion can enact, right? And Lyser, as this avatar, he realizes that this is his fault, essentially, that he's caused this, right? And I think in a lot of ways he tries to rectify that. He tries to do good, and that again, Angie talks about, okay, well, Lyser, maybe I'm feeling more empathy for him and understanding more. Like, I think that was pretty significant, right?
Yeah, Nico, we can't hear you. Did you say something?
Yep, I was muted. I just started talking like I wasn't, but I was just going to say, yeah, I do think I always find it fascinating exploring religion in fantasy, because it's really, there's just a lot of things that you can do with it, and getting to explore a religion from before its birth, to see where it came from, to see how it grows, to see what it turns into over time, including when the leader messiah figure leaves and comes back, and all of that is really interesting. But getting to see too, all of the long-term effects of things that he set into motion, and some of it too, like the persecution of magic users, which that was the Kralavir, if I'm saying that right. Their influence that was trying to get that going way earlier too, and like all of these things that happened, and then this is where we end up. And so it was really great to explore, and just the idea of like him coming back. But it's also like the fact too that there's still people trying to use the curse to control him as well, and it's just that makes it even more tragic. Like, he's been not obviously free of it completely, but there's been really no impact for so long, and then to just be put back into that situation again. And I think that's also just something that I feel like was such like a oh no moment for me, because to have that come back into play. And it's just there's so much to explore with that character. And yeah, Lysair has some really amazing stuff going on in this book, for sure.
Did you catch the organized religion and the dogma with the true sect, and the splintering and the created religion contrasted with the three children when they graze the vortex at Athalie? that little spot on the map that isn't part of a kingdom is actually cut apart from any kingdom border that I never defined. You encounter it here. But yeah, the portal at Atherley is completely other. It's the contrast between the dogmatic power and the actual.
Yeah, and this religion has still turned ultimately everything against Erathon. You know, Erathon is the boogeyman, the devil of of the religion, and even though Lysier was once the avatar, is now disgraced and the broken way, he was the god, he was the light. Erathon was the darkness, and but they're also susceptible to all this corruption, right? The Coriathon is still pulling the strings. The Lord Examiner, she's still pulling the strings and influencing the agenda. And like I said, I absolutely love that element, showing you all of the dangers of organized religion and what can happen, because they're human beings, fallible human beings in charge of it, right? It's just exceptionally done.
A good friend of mine did a master's, or actually a PhD thesis, on how many elements of pagan religions were melted into Christian symbolism. I'm going to stir up a lot of people who hate me for this, in order to bring in the people that they couldn't touch otherwise, because they had to give them. And actually, the whole devil figure with the horns and it's just another symbol of Pan. It's another symbol of the nature spirits. It's another symbol of other older gods, but it was demonized. So you look at the symbols that are part of religions that have crystallized into dogma and what they originally meant, and how they were originally perceived, and how they were turned into something else to fit the agenda, basically, of whatever political means or ends or ideology that humanity wanted to impose on other people. That's what a dogma does, is say, this is straitjacketed thinking, do not deviate, or else. But you look at how the actual symbols that they're moving around morph from what they originally were. You look at the female figure that's the head of Christianity, and she's suddenly a virgin, whereas other cultures that had that, it was different. So the things they choose to demonize to fit an agenda, any religion, pick any religion on earth, and you can pick apart where the control, what we're trying to control, what behaviors we're trying to stop, what explorations we're trying to say are taboo. And it becomes a fascinating game of how people's thinking gets manipulated. And certain people are not going to look on me kindly for saying the symbology is controlling. The spirituality is different. The underlying spirituality may be very, very pure and very wonderful and actually lead people in a very good direction. But the dogma that's laid over top that seeks to steer and control that, and the two things work counter to each other. We see it. Where how can these people who profess to be this religion do this act? Pick any religion you want, when it's against the spirituality underlying that dogma. And so you get these incredibly twisted dichotomies going on. And I guess I wish more people thought about that.
And that's at the heart of, sorry, Nico, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, and that's why I love the exploration of religion and fantasy, because it allows you to look at all that, is all I was going to say. Because, definitely agree with your thoughts. And fantasy is a great way to really explore that and have people see it in, I think, a more open way.
No, I totally agree, Nico. And that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love Janny's work. And Janny knows that in my work, that's so much at the heart of what I write about, and what drives me to write, what fascinates me. So I absolutely loved it.
So it's the whole twist between the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, where the letter of the law takes control and the spirit of the law gets crushed. The same thing with religion, the spirituality and the purity of the religion's intent, and the dogma that twists it to agendas, and the two work counter to each other. And we end up in some of our most tragic humanitarian messes because of that twisting and because of that refusal to look at what is steering, what was originally a very pure and open-ended concept. Because if you throw away the dogma, sometimes your choice will be very different than what the dogma tells you to do. So that's a subject that's always fascinated me, and that's why I explore it in fantasy, because I really don't want to step on anybody's faith or deter them from what they want to believe or think. I do believe that questioning is healthy, because as the religion of light on Ethera demonstrates, the minute you have rigid thinking and the minute you decide that you're going to believe in absolutes and never look outside the edges of those absolutes, you become a tool for whatever walks in the door that fits that image. And suddenly you're going to be doing very inhumane things because you have not doubted what that absolute told you. And then you get the hypocrisy of what are you really doing versus what do you really believe you're doing? What is right? What is wrong? And so that is another of the major themes blended into this series.
Yeah.
Totally. So we are 1 hour and 35 minutes into the discussion. Any important points that you want to bring up? Any plot lines that you want to discuss?
How do we decide? Uh, these are always the streams that we're on here for so long, and it just feels like no time has passed at the same time.
I wanted to discuss this scene, not just discuss. I want to say that this was my favorite scene from the whole book, where Anaton comes in as the hatchet and deceives everybody and saves the villagers. I mean, like the chapter ends, and I was like, okay, and then you get the revelation in the triplets. So I was not ready for that, right? I thought it was him, like. I mean, I did have a doubt, like, how did he reach here so soon? Those doubts were there, but then, okay, the next paragraph really blew my mind away. I really like that. That's why I say that Arathon, more than master of shadow, he's master of, like, tricks, like Loki.
Well, and it was so fun with that too, because it was because of the fact that this guy was just so gruff and had a tendency to just bite people's heads off. Nobody's gonna question this guy. They're just gonna just do whatever. They're like, yeah, we're not dealing with that. So yeah, that was the humor there. I thought was so fun.
In the chariots, we took back to the chariots all the way back to ships.
Yeah.
I think I have two quick things, if that's okay. One, I don't know if these huge moments get lost. When I'm sorry, I'm trying to the lanes. A Sandair clear, like he fixes the lanes, and when he does that, the light in the high temple of light, it goes out because the shrine collapses. And for me, that was probably, of all the images of the book, that sticks out, because it's like, okay, this man-made religion, like the symbol, the ultimate symbol of man, really, to the fellowship's power, that's nothing. It's so insignificant. Asander fixes the lanes, and it corrects this wrongdoing of symbolically fixes. I know it's not totally fixed, but symbolically, that whole religion is wiped out symbolically by the power of the fellowship. So I just remember all the times in the book when the fellowship, the power they wield is like nothing. Is everything else is insignificant, right? And also the fact that they essentially are, they have the power to right these wrongs, but they can only do it under certain specific circumstances because of the things that they're bound by. But so it seemed almost inadvertent, like he's trying to fix the lane flux thing, right? However, fixing the lane flux thing helps extinguish this wrong that has been perpetuated, right? But quickly, I think I want to, because we didn't get to talk about it. I really that I think Blaze. I can't remember. I apologize. Either Blaze or Angie that referred to it is when uh Lysier, who for me I love this book in Lysier. I won't read it for time's sake maybe, but when Lysier had that conversation um oh my gosh, with her name. I'm losing names.
Daliana.
With Daliana, right? With Daliana. And he talks about Talent and he admits how he felt about her and he admits, how she died and the fact that she nearly broke him, he was willing to do anything to keep her happy, to keep her love, and the loss that he really feels about her and the fact that obviously Daliana looks so much like Talbot, reminds him of her, and he has to resist her, and in his own way resist her influence. That whole section for me was the other section that really struck out in this book. That really, if you thought a certain way about Lice here before, I think that passage really would make you change your mind. So, yeah, those are two things I want to quickly mention.
Well, and it's so much that goes back so far with Lysair too, with just realizing because like in Peril's Gate, you kind of have the moment where he kind of admits to himself that he can't let himself think he could be wrong because that would just break him. And he cannot allow that to happen. And, from there, that's where it's kind of outright said. But then when you look back, like that was the whole thing with the schism between him and Talith. It was she questioned him. She questioned whether he was really doing the right thing. And he could not allow that. He couldn't question himself because if he questions himself, that means he could be wrong. And like, he can't, the way his mind is being forced, he just absolutely can't do that. And so it's seeing that it's kind of a full circle moment for his character where he's kind of fully admitting some things and realizing some things, and we're getting to see his awareness of it, all for it to be torn away again, which is just, tragic.
The one final thing I wanted to discuss, because I feel like we haven't discussed her at all, is just the dichotomy of the opposite views of Arathon and Alera. We haven't talked about Alera really at all during this live stream. So Arathon, he's in prison. He's trapped for 250 years. And he has his memories wiped in part to save him from, the being tracked by the Coriani. So he has no memories of this great love that he's lost. Although if you read, you still have snippets of feelings that he once had, and no memory that he had a daughter. None of that. But Alera, she remembers everything. She is feeling in some way living through him, and she feels his pain and her pain. So she's taking on double responsibility, and it's kind of like while she's still in the service of the Coriani, so she's still kind of like a pawn in some ways. It's just I don't know. I felt very, very, very bad for her, and she's always tracking and looking out for Arathon what he's doing. So I don't know how she kept it all together in this one, Janny. Though just the whole story of what's going on with Alera was just it was wild.
Did you catch the significance of the signet ring? It will be explained fully again later, so I'm not too worried if you didn't. But yeah, when Arathon's memories were stripped, some of those memories weren't there. He did it himself. And the signet ring, the royal signet ring that Alera is carrying, is significant in that manner. And it will be fully explained later, so I need not go into it in depth. If you missed exactly what happened in this book, it will come around again. But watch for that one. Watch for that one. So yeah, he feels an absence in this book. And there's a reason for the feelings are there, but the absence is critical. So it goes beyond what Talia did when she stripped his awareness of himself. There's sort of a two-step thing happening here. There's more to the underpinnings to it, if that makes sense. or if it doesn't, be patient. It will. It's the one thing, if you miss the little subtleties when things are first introduced, you will always pick it up as you go further. It will always come out in the later volumes when you really have to know it. It will kick your butt.
Yep. It's what you do.
Right. Yeah.
True.
Yes. Right. So that was a great discussion. I'm sure if we had some more time, we will have a lot more to speak. And Janny has something for us.
Yep. You asked
Uh,
always for a tidbit. So if Angie doesn't have anything she wants to close with on
yes,
something
please.
significant,
Go ahead, Janny. Go ahead.
I'm going to give you some of the back history from 5018 of Havish's crown lineage, because you see Gestry take on the High Kingship for the first time since the rising, or the big uprising that threw down the High Kings. And if you want to read exactly how that bloodline survived, that story is in Reigns of Destiny. But this history I'm going to give you picks up after the close of Reigns of Destiny. Why did Havage's lineage stay on Athera when the other ones were pushed through the gates and the gates were directionally sealed by the Fellowship? And often when people look at that time period of the Rising and the Mistrace conquest, they oversimplify and figure it all happened in a year. It didn't. It happened over the course of 100+ years. The Mistrace conquest was very slow, and events on Athera were directly triggering how they lost control of it, and they would lose another area and another area and another area. So when the Mistraith came through and Traith made his sacrifice and closed the gate, the Fellowship, the Paravians, and all of the crowned High Kings, every one of them, were called to the front line to stop this thing. And they were containing it. It was contained very close to Southgate, in that waste area south of West Chand at the very southern tip. And West Chand at that time was under Paravian sovereignty. That was not a human place. So huge complications happened because of that in fighting the Mistraith. So basically, suddenly the Fellowship were absent. Suddenly your attuned High Kings are absent. You got this stuff fomenting and boiling. There are all kinds of problems with the towns boiling to the surface. You get a glimpse of that in the Gallant as the various factions are moving into that power vacuum to see what they can grab. So here's why Havish's line has stayed on Athera. The kid was an infant orphan. He was 1 year old or less. He was brought to sacred ground at Linstair Falls, the sacred grove where the High Kings liaised with the Paravians, but he was an infant. And the man who took him there went crazy, died in the care of Acideps, completely mad, knew he was going to lose it to drop this infant, and the one place where the townspeople could not go to murder the last survivor, which was a bastard child. And that's all in Reigns of Destiny. Ashandir was the one who picked up that child. So he was recovered by the Fellowship sorcerers, but his marbles were a bit rattled loose. Okay, he wasn't all the way with it. So the Fellowship would have looked after his raising. He was called Tiendweth Slornman. He survived on mare's milk until Ashandir recovered him. Luhain's discorporation and Ashandir's absence broke the line holding the Mistraith. So in order to rescue this baby, they lost control of the first line holding the Mistraith. So that began to throw the forces into the retreat, because there were only a few Fellowship sorcerers present, and the Centaur Guardians and the High Kings. And the sorcerers would have dispersed at that point to put down the damage from the Rising to make sure the clan lineages survived. So pretty much one major pillar was yanked off that front line, and that began. So Foulwood, which is in the south in West Chand, fell under siege and was weak in the line as men run rogue from the Rising, and the Red Swords of Slaughter seek clan folk in the wilds. And at that time, I don't know if you remember the scene in the early Curse of the Mistraith where Arathon and Ashandir stopped, where a centaur was pulled down and killed. The Centaur Guardian, Malathach, was pulled down on that spot, and that happened at this time. That was done by townspeople who were trying to overwhelm, get into the free wilds, murder clans people, break the boundaries, basically rip compact law apart, which, if you realize from Grand Conspiracy, if compact law falls, the Fellowship would have been required to exterminate humanity from the planet. So you have this tremendous mess. Mist rays come in, all of it caused by men. Rising happened, which Davian triggered. All kinds of threads are crossing at this point. So this centaur fell at the old way, defending the way past Caethal came through at them, and that's exactly what you saw at the opening of Mistray. So you can see the massive intersections of history that I know, but did not make the book because it would have been irrelevant. It would have dragged this thing into a ridiculous, it would have read like a history book. Okay, so this child grew up into what was called the Moonstruck Prince. He was the infant heir in 1519. He was placed in care of a timberman's household in Deal to hide him. So he's a little bit touched. He was raised by ordinary people. The Fellowship kept him sequestered so nobody would find out who he was. When he grew up, mentally touched by resonant overload, he was kindly raised in hiding. None knew his identity. He grew up simple. In 1519, Foulwood lost to the Mistwraith. The defense fell back to Waterfork. Mornos, to guard, lay under mist. The ground between the old route, Valzane, was a debatable conquest in that sometimes it was under mist and sometimes they drove it back. Only the Paravians were on the battle line as the Fellowship scrambled to regroup compact law. Lithmere was deserted. The Paravians had withdrawn to Carathwir. So even the Paravian presence that held certain areas of the land too difficult for people to cross were deserting certain areas because it was too dangerous to be there. So the conquest of Ethera happened by increments that I will not detail here. Child of Prophecy went over some of that. That was another of the shorts. At this point, you really want to read all the shorts at this point in the series. Okay, so this kid grew up at 22 years old. He married his foster cousin. So the family that raised him were foster parents. He married a cousin of that family at Deal. He had 6 royal children born to that union. His first daughter, Tiandara, is named heir designate in the year 5040. So she was named the official heir. At that time, in 5054, Losmar was seized by town rule and the first mayor was elected in Losmar. And at that time, it was a fishing port. It was under mist. It began to transform into a library where scholars sequestered books from the old times. And also, they pitched and got rid of compact law. So the heir designate there was no crowned high king to enforce compact law there. There was nobody to step in. The Fellowship was busy elsewhere with, obviously, crisis with the Mistwraith, all points on the continent. So this young heir at 19 years old stepped in to try to reestablish compact law. So she went head and head with the townspeople. She was betrayed. She was headstrong. She felt duty bound to do this. She was betrayed. And that opened up where the High King's lineage was sequestered. The entire family was murdered. And the only one to escape was the Moonstruck Prince, who at this time was older. Touch simple. He was saved actually by Dakar's prophecy. He was pulled out. And Lothmar remained under town rule. At that point, Asandir sequestered him in secret. And it was a battle with his inconsolate grief because he lost all of his family, all of his children, his wife, everybody. So he was shattered by that. And he lived out his years tended by a weaver, incognito. And one child was born to a liaison between that weaver and him. And that saved the lineage. So in 5061, this is how tangled all this was. The Fellowship directionally sealed the gates because of Dakar's prophecy, 5061. So 5062, the Fellowship sealed the gates. In 5063, the only child conceived of the late marriage of the Moonstruck Prince was a 3-year-old kid as the last cascade of the Mistwraith fell. So that lineage could never be sent through the gate. The kid was a baby, 3 years old, too young, totally ignorant of who he was. So at that point, the Fellowship decided to allow the lineage to forget itself. So Hamian Slornmain is born, held ignorant of his royal lineage for safety. He was apprenticed in 5080 to a master dyer, and he perpetuated the family trade thereafter, guarded by the Fellowship of Seven, unbeknownst to them. So he had no clue who he was, so that the townspeople could never track the lineage to his surviving until 5095. The Mistwraith's triumph snuffs the last ray of sunlight on Ethera, the fall of the Paravian High King to despair. So Sestian, first of Daraquend, in that final battle, burned himself out on the field and fled through Athalie to immolation rather than cede the defeat of the planet to Deshthir. So Parathane Adaraquend was Parathane's second, was last crowned Paravian High King. You will see more of this history come forward. At 5100, the final retreat of the Paravians from the continent, triggered by something else that I won't mention here, Tahava Warden cedes the Althane Tower to Sethfir of the Fellowship and bequeaths him the Earthlink. And Slornman lineage remained ignorant of itself until, in Curse of the Mistwraith, Asandir sets off to retrieve the heir, which is King Eldir in the series. So there's your bit of history behind Jestry and what happened in Initiate's trial. So picking up the links. So I thought you'd enjoy that little piece of something, whether it adds dimension or not. But yeah, the people often assume that the back history of Ethera is very, very simple. It's not. The number of things I couldn't mention that entangled these events here, because they're going to pop up in song. There's still tape over my mouth in many sections. I was, drawing out this timeline going, whoop, pitch, can't mention that, pitch, can't mention that. So it'll come out.
Wow. I'm so hyped for Destiny's Conflict and the Song of Mystery. So
bittersweet though. We're getting near the end of our discussions and near the end
when
of
you
the
hit the end of Song of the Mysteries, it's like Cursed Ships Warhost is sort of a trilogy. Arc 4 is going to have a resounding finish, and Arc 4 is going to blow your fuses completely off the rocket, because a lot of stuff happens in Arc 4. But really, Song of the Mysteries is the final finale of even Arc 4. It's the same thing where it splits into a trilogy. And what you're going to realize when you read Song of the Mysteries, my bet is you're not going to mourn the series being over. You're going to go, oh my God, all the things that you missed, all the things that were right in front of you that you didn't see. The richness is yet to be found, that's to be mined in those early volumes. And I do intend to take some events from the early history and bring them forward as shorts. And there's a future timeline after Song that is not simple. It's very convoluted. Who knows what I'll be able to pick up and go from here, but it will all be determined on how much support there is for me to take the time to do it.
Absolutely. I imagine that I'm gonna have trouble resisting immediately starting a reread after doing songs. So it's been
why resist it? How many times have people gone through Malazan? Why resist it?
Don't resist it.
I've been telling myself I should probably try Malazan a second time for over a decade now and haven't gotten there. But I've reread other things. No, this is a series I will reread many, many times for the rest of my life. I am positive. So it's, I just have, I wanted to wait and then I want to finish the whole thing before I start rereading. But I mean, literally since Ships of Merrier, I finished that book and I just wanted to read it again. I mean, I just, I've kept feeling like I kind of want to reread, even though wasn't done yet. And so after I'm done, I'll probably start a very quick reread and try and get people, or if somebody else starts up a buddy read, I might end up jumping on or something. I don't know.
If it were me knowing what's in there, a reread now before Song will make Song richer. A reread after Song is going to be a whole different experience. But anything that you relook at from any of the arcs after finishing any of the arcs will make the following arc richer, because I knew everything was in there. All of it was in there. There's some key signal scenes that you think you're done with from Curse of the Mistwraith, that you are absolutely not. There was a great deal more happening in those scenes, and it's all going to come out. So anytime you refresh your memory, it's going to make going forward richer. And anytime refreshing your memory going backward, the same thing. And even if you gain a decade of life experience, the whole story will change, because your decade of life experience will shift how you perceive the characters.
Yeah, Angie, just wait for how many book one connections there are in Destiny's Conflict.
Yeah,
because
tons.
Wow.
insane.
And that's not even going to touch how many book 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 connections there are going to pop up in songs.
I imagine. That's why I'm so excited. But
the tiebacks are enormous. Enormous. I practically dog-eared my desk copies all over again, going back to the original scene to say exactly what did I show the reader, and what, so that I didn't either overly explain something or under explain something, or make sure I had the exact detail that I put on the page exactly right to build off it. But even inconsequential scenes that you don't think are important, I'm thinking of the scene in Ships where Illyra takes the kid through the back route to visit Moriel Prime, and the kid's stopping in the cellars to catch roaches. Things are going to come up that you don't think were important, and they may not be important. They aren't important, but the groundwork was laid for something else to come later.
Nah.
And so there's nothing that pops in like a Deus Ex Machina in these books, Deus Ex Machina, because all that groundwork was laid. It's already there.
I can't
For
wait.
sure.
Can't wait.
We just cannot wait. Yes, of course. And we will do all we can to, spread the word wherever I go. Like whenever I'm joining a live stream where, people are just chatting in BookTube, I always mention Wars of Light and Shadow. Just the other day in Matt's, I don't know if you know Matt's fantasy books. So in his live yesterday, I did mention that, and he was like, people are noticing this series. A lot of read-alongs are going on, and at least people are trying out the first book, to see and understand what's this hype about. So people are getting this, hint that okay, there is this series out there which people need to explore, especially fantasy lovers. So it is a good time for them to start.
Well, I really appreciate the outreach going on here, and I would say that if you are on any of these live streams and the hosts are expressing interest in this series, to encourage them to get in touch with me, because I will kick my publicist and try to get them publicity copies of at least the first book, if not more. I will bend over backwards to get review copies into their hands if they're actually interested in starting the series at this time, because the word getting out there would be really, really touching to me, because I could see the fruition of all these years of work. So thank you for bringing that up. And, as long as they understand that, quote, when things don't seem to be happening, they are happening. They're absolutely happening. And the fun part is going to be watching the dynamite that falls on you people who have not read Destiny's Conflict. Because you think the series, nothing happens. Well, you remember chapter 5 in Storm Fortress, where Arathon goes into the grove? That scene? That nobody saw that coming until the end of the series. It happened at the midpoint. Destiny's Conflict is a little bit like that. Stuff is going to come to the surface. Things are going to happen that you are not going to expect, because that's going to throw Song of the Mysteries into entirely new territory. And that was always intended. So,
Angie, Nico, you've read Destiny's Conflict, right? So yeah,
No,
so
nothing.
only Angie that hasn't read yet. So
Sorry.
get ready. Get
No,
ready
that's
for
like, hey, you're the only one who stuck to the schedule. So I mean, like, if anything, you should be blaming us. But
yeah, no,
Yeah,
I'm not
there's
criticizing it. I'm not criticizing Angie. I'm just saying she's the one who hasn't read it yet. So
Try the audio version of Destiny's Conflict. It's fantastic.
Oh yes, that's my plan, because Shibipo told me that that's the one with the audiobook, because I wanted an audiobook for Initiate's trial, because then I can just listen when I'm doing something, so that I can read it faster. But unfortunately, it was not
You
there.
don't want to read it faster, and you
I was gonna say,
definitely
yeah,
want
take your time.
you want a seatbelt. You want
Yes.
a seatbelt. For that one, you want a seatbelt.
and Angie, that one's gonna, especially you knowing how you feel about things. Yeah, you're
Wow.
There's so many things I want to talk about, but
gonna. Yeah.
Oh
you're
yeah,
gonna-
the next one will be explosive, and it won't even scratch the surface of what's going to happen in the finale.
yeah.
Trust
Well,
me, it won't scratch the surface of what's going to happen in the finale. And the biggest, hardest thing I think that I have in trying to explain people, because I can't do this as the author, is to say the themes in this series are just as big as anything in any of the other series that are out there that are huge. The difference between my way of approaching it and the male authors who have become huge, like Malazan, like Martin, is I show it through the individual's eyes. So the big themes are going to emerge more slowly, but they've been there all along. It was your own prejudice. So you sort of have to read it like a Robin Hobb through the character's eyes, but the massive events are massive. They're all there. It's just I unwind that thread more slowly. And that was deliberately done. It was because that's the way we go through life. We're born little babies. We know nothing, Jon Snow, and then we find out as we go. So I think the assurance for the readership to know that when you get to these final volumes, that richness is going to be there, instead of like, oh, Curse of the Mistwraith, they say it's got these big themes in it. Well, it does, but not to the degree that you're going to see as the threads unwind.
I'm just, again, just so happy you stuck with it. So honored to be here as part of this. As I said, Janny, you've influenced me so much in terms of, obviously my writing will never ever approach, a tenth, a hundredth of yours, but definitely even as I could write my series, I feel more of your influence when I think about your books, as I write, and it just
but it'll be purely yours, and I can never touch what you're doing. So don't put what you're doing down. Your series is amazing. It's amazing, and I understand the next volume is the game changer. So I'm looking forward to that tremendously. If you like complex themes, you've got to try Paul's work. P.L. Stewart, Drowned Kingdom.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Blaze has read book 4, so I think he liked it.
I absolutely loved it. We'll discuss that more on the cover review, which is next month. So stay tuned for that.
Yay.
Thank you.
Book 2's over there on the to be read shortly shelf.
So. But it gets better and better and better as you go, Nico. You're gonna love it.
I'm really excited. So yeah, I enjoyed this, and I've had I've heard a lot of great things, so I'm continuing. So it's just there's too many darn things to read. So I'm slow to get to everything right now. But
well, if I can take a moment and praise my fellow people here, Paul is writing a really, really gutsy series with a lot of edges that he's taking a lot of chances that most authors, he's treading ground most authors dare not tread. And I love it. I'm here for it. I really appreciate Blaze. He's consistently working to bring books to your attention that nobody else is talking about. And he doesn't care about the following. He doesn't care about kissing up to fame. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. And he's finding the real gems. So I got to hand it to Blaze because we're all here in a way because of him. I got to hand it to Nico for his enormous enthusiasm. You just eat up books and you're not afraid to show what you really, really love. And again, you don't care what anybody else thinks. You're just going to put that material out there. And so I listen to your channel often because of that sheer enthusiasm for what you do. Your love just comes through and it shines. And Angie, what can I say about Angie? You're bucking the prejudice against women. You're bucking the prejudice against everything else in the book. You consistently read more than just fantasy and science fiction. You're willing to talk about other books, and you just stick at it for the sheer love. You're not doing it for the attention. You're not doing it for the following. You're doing it because you love books. And that takes a special kind of human being. And it takes a special kind of human being to volunteer as much of their time as they have to do these live stream discussions on schedule for every single book. So my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Janny.
I want to
Thank you,
say
thank
closing words. I'm so honored that all of you, like whom I think that are so talented to agree to join my live stream. I have this blurb in the back of this book which says that it ought to be illegal for one person to have so much talent. Stephen Donaldson talks about Janny Wurts. So I literally have jitters when I think that Janny Wurts knows me. She's that Angela exists. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I'm not just exaggerating because I think right now at this point my favorite authors are two female authors, and that's Janny Wurts and Robin Hobb. I mean, I don't think anybody has yet impressed me the way these two great authors have impressed me. So thanks a lot for giving us this. I'm also looking forward to reading your other series also and the standalones also after I finish this. And starting with To Ride Hell's Chasm. I have it with me. So I'm going to read it after. If I have a gap between Destiny's Conflict and songs, then I will use that time to read that, if not after that. But yes,
The time you want to read the short stories before you go into songs. Yeah.
Except for Black Bargain, I have read everything, and so that's pending. Black Bargain.
It's safe to read Black Bargain now.
Okay.
Because they're little things from those shorts that are going to crop up in Arc 4 and in the finale, and they will be explained and they will be gone into in the series. So you don't have to have read the shorts, but it's just like that little glimpse of history I just gave you. It will make those events that are going to be part of what's thrusting up underneath much richer, because it will go into the actual event, whereas you might get it as a bit of a synopsis or an encounter or a bypassing fact in the series proper. In the short stories, you will see the actual event. Mm-hmm. And so you will see it bigger.
Got it. Yep. Yeah. And I was also thinking that when we get the arcs of songs, maybe we should have a Discord channel and discuss, because this might be the first time all of us, except Blaze, maybe reading it for the first time together. So because Janny is emphasizing all these connection and callbacks to previous books and previous chapters, I think I might need help there.
Well, what you could also possibly do, you can do your Discord if you like, but I don't want to go into Discord because what they do with your data, it's really not a very great platform for what they're actually doing with what you put on there. I might be able to make a private chat on the Paravia chat for you guys. And there's goods and bads to that. There's goods because I could participate or I could be there and see what's happening and answer your questions. The bads are that the general public probably couldn't get in unless we admitted them one by one. But if you want to do that, maybe we could do both even, or do a private chat on, say, Goodreads, which people have to join by invitation so other people could get in. I don't know what you want to do, but if it's Discord, you'll have to bring your questions to the Paravia chat to ask me anything, because I won't be able to see what you're doing.
Paravian chats, I have not used it, but it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, there's good reasons. Twitter too. I mean, I don't know how you feel about doing it on Twitter, but Twitter does have, you can create a group and
people could join. Well, I'm already there. Yeah. So as long as they don't play games with the money, as long as they don't get odd that way, Twitter is good, as long as the general public can't walk in there uninvited and see spoilers, because the spoilers coming up for song are just, they would be so huge, and you don't want that volume spoiled. You really, really don't. You really don't. But it's more massive than you have any idea. And at this point, the individuals who have gone and actually read it, and they're less than, on my two hands, far less than my two hands. The reactions have all been the same. Wow. It exceeded their expectations by a lot.
Oh, cannot wait.
So I hope I can maintain that record.
Can't wait, yeah.
Yeah, I cannot wait. Absolutely cannot wait.
So is it January? When are we getting it? Is it in January that we are getting ARC, or?
No, the page proofs are now done. I sent in my corrections. I understand that the pre-orders for the United States and Canada have been brought forward to May, so we are going to get that simultaneous release that was promised. They took it away and they made the US Canada's July, with the UK as spring, May. And so I raised Cain and said this wasn't meant to happen because I know press time was supposed to be November. So all of a sudden that flipped now. The release date in the US and Canada seems to have been moved up to May. So my guess is that they will be selecting an audio narrator. They will be starting that process, and the ARCs would probably come together sometime between now and May. But right now we're into Thanksgiving and holiday season. I'm doing a major trip internationally. I'll be gone for part of December. So my feeling is after New Year's, when the editors actually are answering their mail and listening, I will see what I can do about getting ARCs to you people, how fast they will move on it, who they will allow to see it, whether they will bother to make an ARC. All those questions are up in the air. I haven't had any answers when I asked in October. But now we're too close to holidays for me to get anything but ghosted on this subject. So after I finish the first of the year, New Year's is done. After I do my tax accounting, which I do right after the first of the year, that's when I will hammer and see what I can get for you and see what's possible. Because I want you guys to have that ARC. I want to build that excitement. But I have to be careful because any material getting out now risks a huge spoiler if it escaped. So it's got to go through the proper channels to do this right.
For sure.
Excellent.
So excited for it, and this was an exciting discussion. Amazing book. Looking forward to next book, Destiny's Conflict, and I will reach out to all of you to schedule a favorable time. It's holiday season. I don't know everybody's vacation plan, holiday plans, but hope we can make it in December. But worst case, beginning of January, at least we will have the Destiny's Conflict live.
Yeah, I have a 2-week period where I'm gone in December. So
Okay.
it's okay with me whenever you schedule it, but just know that I've got a 2-week period where I'm gone. So we just work around that. That's all. Or we push it to January, but it's up to you guys because I may be able to get Wi-Fi where I'm going, but I'm halfway around the world and I'm there for business. So whether I can carve a 2-hour slot out of my day when we're going over there to work, basically. So it's a little iffy, but I do have a brand new laptop and it is fully set up. So I should be able to access Wi-Fi and Twitter, just I'll be 12 hours removed from this time. So I don't intend to disappear, but what I can manage while we're overseas, I'm not sure. So we'll be in touch with that. And you can do this without me too. We can always have another discussion later.
No.
We can't do this without you, Jenny. No, not without you, Jenny.
Well, it'll just be close to Christmas. It'll just be a Christmas present for people. That's all.
Especially Destiny's Conflict. We can't have it without you. There's too much going on in that one.
Damn, I'll have to have 6 rolls of duct tape on the desk to.
We can't wait. Jenny. Once again, everybody, thank you so much, Nico, Angie, Blaze, Jenny. Just amazing. They're so honored part of this group, and I'm just so excited, through the moon. I was trying to sort out my end of year top 10 books for traditionally published books, and I realized that all the books I read from Jenny this year, like it's almost a list of just Jenny's books, right?
I'll take it. I'll take it.
As good as so many of those other books are, I mean, I can't not rank, all of Jenny's books that I've read this year on that list, and that pretty well takes up, 90% of the list. So it's. I
had to make a rule: only one book per series, or my whole list would just be Wars of Light and Shadow. But then I read Sorcerer's Legacy too. Reading Hell's Chasm next month with some people.
Oh, that one will be fun. I don't mind if you drop that comment. You can cover your 10 books, but I don't mind if you drop that comment.
Oh, I've noted that specifically, and I've just said that it's 100%. Everyone knows. Well, for my top 10, I'm going to start with one just because I'm like, everybody knows this was going to be Lords of Light and Shadow. I can't. It's so hard to pick an actual favorite one. It's so difficult. But with reading that, I'm constantly talking about it with any ranking. Like, this could have been the whole series. So.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Can't wait.
All right. So thanks everybody for joining, and we will be back with the Smith Conflict live stream very soon. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for joining. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.